One's life begins to change when their desires transform into concrete actions. You're listening to the Desire to Be podcast, where your desires for your life and relationships become your mastery. I'm your host, Devora Goldberg, and thank you for joining. Welcome back to another episode of the Desire to Be podcast. I'm super excited about today's guest. Today I have Levi Rothchild together with me, and we're going to dive into something fascinating, which is comedy at all different periods of life. The happy times, the sad times, the scary times, the painful times, because that's really what Julie encapsulates. So for those of you who don't know Julie is a Jewish comic content creator on social media. She's also a writer. She's an actress and a former medical clown. She's originally from Minnesota. And we figured out, Julie and I, that she knows my family back there in Minnesota. So we have a little connection there. But now Julie lives in Israel with her family. She's passionate about finding the funny in life, even during trying times. Julie is available, by the way. Listen up, guys. She's available to speak about her trying times and the funny that she finds in it all to your communities when she comes to the U.S. this summer. So for more information, you'll want to check out you're going to connect with her at imofficiallyjulie@gmail.com. It's going to be dropped in the show notes so you guys can connect directly. Julie, welcome.
Hey, thanks so much, Dwar.
Now that I gave you a full background, or my listeners, a full background of who you are, I want you to give us a little bit more tell us a little bit about yourself.
Let's see. Well, my mother said that I started talking at about 1.5. Should we go back there? Oh, maybe not that far. I guess we don't have more than like 20 hours for this. So a little bit more about myself. So I grew up in Minneapolis, Minnesota, just a typical American Jewish girl. I grew up Reform. I had a very normal, happy childhood and upbringing. And I got married to an Israeli. I mean, there's so much fill in the blanks here, so we can go back to it. But when I married an Israeli, we decided that we'd live in Israel, and sort of in between starting a family and making a decision to go back to Israel, we also started to become religious. So there were a lot of life changes for me in a relatively short amount of time. Not everything was smooth sailing as far as becoming religious goes, and making a move back to Israel with 3 children at the time, one of them a baby, was also a challenge. You had talked about finding the funny, right, in all kinds of times, because that's what life is. It's cyclical. So there were times in my life, actually, and I'll be very open because I'm empowered by my ability to share that for over a decade of my life, I suffered from debilitating depression. Now, apparently, this is pretty common among comedians, which is also an interesting note. But because of all of the life changes, and I just kind of lost myself. And for 20 years, I didn't do anything performance-wise, nothing like that. I had done it before, more in an amateur way, really for fun. And then domestic life and having kids. And I have 5 children, plus a daughter-in-law and now a grandson. So all of that, including becoming religious and moved, took its toll on me. And then, if we can fast forward 20 years, at that point, I had my 5th child, and I started to get involved in like a community theater here for women. There are a few performance troupes for women in English here in Israel. And all of a sudden, I felt like the breath really come back to my body. I didn't realize how much not doing something that is so much a part of you can inhibit your true being. And once I started to perform again, it changed my world. And that led me to become a medical clown, which you had mentioned, which we can go into. And then I found myself basically doing my shtick in front of my phone, which led me to social media.
Fascinating. Tell us more about how comedy plays a factor in your family and daily life. I mean, we see it on social media, what you share with us. What does comedy look like in your family?
Well, when I was a clown, my oldest was in yeshiva, and I asked him, I was dressed up one day to go to the hospital, and I asked him if he wanted me to accompany him to yeshiva. And he kind of gave me a look like, I don't think so. So my sense of humor is kind of dry and a bit sarcastic, and I love puns. So and I'm also very physically goofy. Like my comic role models are Lucille Ball and Carol Burnett, and they just sort of are used to it at this point. They're like, there goes mom, making her faces. Or sometimes when I put makeup on and I come out as different characters, nobody even blinks anymore. So
Different
they're pretty used
hair,
to it.
different makeup.
Yeah. Yeah. There's like, yeah, there she goes again.
Right.
She's just wondering, I come down the stairs as somebody else.
And the reason why I love your humor so much is because you make fun or you make light of life. I mean, we cannot take life so seriously, especially when it's hard. And and I don't say this lightly, especially when we're living in the middle of the war. And you living in Israel, you're actually living in the middle of the war and the politics and the reality of the loss of life on a daily basis. But take us back to when you started your journey in Israel, making Aliyah with a family, like you mentioned, three little children. It's a new country, it's a new language, a new lifestyle. But whatever you share with us, it's funny, it's hilarious. Going to the shopping store, going to conversing with people. Tell us like your earliest memory of this language barrier that you experienced on a funny level.
Okay, so I'll go back a little bit further. The first time I ever came to Israel, I was 20 years old. And I did not grow up in a Zionist home, but I had friends who had been to Israel and really, yeah, you should go. And I had been in college for 2 years and decided to take a year off. So I'll go to Israel. I was placed on a kibbutz, and the kibbutzim at the time were like, it was like real kibbutz. Like the children were raised in children's homes. And this was before the Gulf War. After the Gulf War, the kibbutzim changed a little bit. And I had started to learn conversational Hebrew. Now, I told you that I had grown up as a Reform Jew and I had a bat mitzvah and everything. But when it came to like actually being able to communicate, I couldn't get too far.
Hmm.
So once I had a little bit of Hebrew down, I went from like cleaning the public toilets to peeling potatoes in the kitchen to working in one of the children's homes. And they were 3 years old. So I would try out my Hebrew and they would laugh at me. And then I'd make them say words in English and I'd laugh at them. But one real memory I have is after that year, which completely changed my life, I ended up graduating from college. I moved to Washington, D.C. for several years. And then I moved to Israel on my own. This was before, like, basically, I made Aliyah 3 times. It's a little confusing, but the first time I was alone and I lived in Jerusalem and I called a cab and the cab took me to my destination. And when I wanted to return home, I had a different cab. And I got in the cab and I asked him in Hebrew, how much will this cost? So he gave me a rate higher than what it costs to go there. So I said to him, "Ten li hafsaka," which is a literal translation of give me a break. It does not work in Hebrew. So I just remember he just kind of like looked back at me, like, what is she trying to say? So that was a fail. And I have had many language fails. I think any of us, any immigrant to any new country with a new language is going to have fails. And I just laugh. I mean, to this day, even though I'm conversationally fluent in Hebrew, all of my family here in Israel, my husband's side of the family, they're all Israelis. So I speak Hebrew a lot. But that's just one little example. And that's something I bring into my comedy. It's just like one of my fascinations is how poorly translated English is here in Israel and how Google Translate is so dependent upon. And you have so many English speakers, and it doesn't matter. Nobody's consulting an English speaker. How would this look on our menu? Or will this be offensive to an English speaker because this is so poorly translated? It gives me great material for my shtick.
It's hilarious. Continue doing it. It just makes me laugh. Like these little bouts that you just do. Do you know someone who's stressed? Or rather, do you know someone who's not stressed? Stress is a normal part of life. The only part which is not normal is when we hold onto stressful emotions like resentment, worry, anger, or frustration within. In my 15-minute guided meditations, I guide my clients to identify a stress that they're holding onto within their bodies and release it, leaving them with calm, inner peace, and ease. As a listener of the Desire to Be podcast, my gift to you is a free 15-minute guided meditation while spots are still available. DM me on Instagram at its.devoragoldberg or on Facebook at Devora Goldberg to claim your free session now. Take us back to your career as a medical clown.
Okay, so I was really interested in becoming a clown. It was more the clown part of it because I had the silly side of me that had been repressed for so many years. And Israel has the most medical clowns in the world. Probably not too surprising considering that we are so, as a Jewish nation, so eager to help and we have Bikur Cholim. I saw this course and I was pretty postpartum with my last child at this point. So I waited until he was a little bit older. I was very nervous about the medical part. The clown part, I was like, yeah, I can do that. Medical part, I'm not so sure.
Mm-hmm.
It was about a 5.5-month course. And we went into hospitals. Now, a medical clown is usually going to go into a place where there is a population at risk. So a hospital, a nursing home, a battered women's shelter, a special needs school, that sort of thing. And it really showed me the power of humor and how humor is healing. And not only is it healing, what studies have shown is that if a patient needs to go into surgery, if they have a medical clown accompany them into the operating room, they tend to need less anesthesia and they tend to need less medication coming out of the operation. That is how powerful it is.
If you can elaborate on that, what does it do to the psyche, to the body?
It helps boost our endorphins. It helps boost the immune system response. It helps lower stress levels. In a way, it's sort of like a magic pill. And I've seen it with my own two eyes because when I was in the hospital and I wasn't getting paid, this was a volunteer thing. And most medical clowns in Israel are volunteer. There are some who are professional clowns who are on staff at hospitals. That was a really big commitment for me at the time. And I would go into Israel's largest hospital, and there was an outpatient clinic for burn patients, basically. And I would meet the children who had their appointments. Now, these were kids who were post-inpatient. So a lot of their scars had healed, but they still need to go and get their bandages changed and wounds dressed. And I would ask if I could accompany them into the appointment, obviously getting the parents' permission. And my whole intent was to entertain them and to take their mind off of what was happening with them. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't, but for the most part, I think it did. And I just saw how these kids who had been through so much were able to connect with something so simple as like a balloon animal or a magic trick. Mm-hmm. It was really amazing. And it is across the board for all ages, from children to elderly, also in nursing homes. The job of a clown, really, a medical clown, is whoever's in a hospital, whoever's in a nursing home, they don't really want to be there. That's like, those are the dark places. Mm. And a medical clown helps take a patient in their imagination to a better place. So I'll give you an example. As a clown, let's say I'm with a child in the hospital. You never actually ask a patient, how are you? Because usually the answer is horrible. Mm-hmm. Okay. Where do you go with that? It's more like, where are you from? And what grade are you in? And what do you like to study at school? And who are your friends? And then you can get into this whole, and what do you like to do? Oh, I like to play soccer. So then we can, even if the person, let's say, is bedridden, we can still play a game of soccer, imaginary soccer. I'll give you an example. A lot of patients in Israel are Arab, and I don't speak Arabic, but I do speak gibberish. And it's amazing the ability to communicate with somebody else through nonverbal language, whether it's bodily expression or, like I said, gibberish, you can communicate. So
I'm
it
thinking
was
Mr.
really,
Bean as you're speaking.
yeah, or Charlie Chaplin, what have you, or the
Yeah.
Swedish Chef. Nobody knew what he was saying. Yeah. So it was, I just saw this really powerful, the power of using humor in dark places, which really brings light to those places.
Yeah. And I think that you've done it not only over there, you've done it also taking us through your journey of living in Israel. And it is a journey because we always bump into different differences or funny times, sad times, scary times, especially now that we're living in the throes of what happened on October 7th. The reason why I feel satisfied, I shouldn't say like or enjoy, but the reason why I feel satisfied watching you on social media is because you give a full rounded picture. You give the raw information as well as feelings, which we're humans, but at the same time, as as a comedian, you do see things in a funny light, and sometimes it's dark humor, but it's humor nevertheless. How has comedy really played a role for you in the midst of this war?
So it really threw me off guard because, October 7th happened and it was like, there's nothing funny here.
Right.
And I changed my content a bit to more of like looking at life right now, how the school across the street from me turned into a makeshift army base where citizens all over were helping prepare meals for the soldiers. This is before they were deployed to Gaza, do their laundry, that sort of thing. So I really wanted to show of what was going on. And sometimes I'd throw in little drops of humor here and there and just the language I chose. And then after, let's see, we're 4 months into the war right now. So I would say after about 2 months, 2.5 months, I was feeling angry. And people really were asking me, like, we need comic relief. So then I turned my content into, like you said, it was a little bit more dark humor, making fun of what I look to be ridiculous in the world with the so-called woke college students who didn't know what they were talking about, that sort of thing.
Or
So
even giving us a
now,
glimpse into, sorry for cutting you off, but even give us
it's
a
okay.
glimpse into you're going shopping and what that looks like for a normal human being who thinks they're just going shopping, but in the middle there's a siren that goes off and what does that look like? Everyone running, trying to get to shelter. That's not normal. But you showed it to us in a crazy funny way. We got the point, we got the message. Our hearts were with you in that moment. But you also had that outlet of the comedy outlet showing it us through that the funny lens.
Right. And sometimes an idea would just come to me. I remember I went to a manicure appointment, and when I got in the car, I thought, what time is it? Okay. So they were like, they usually send rockets over at the top of the hour, and it's often at this time or it's at that time. And now I might be closer to this time. So what am I going to do if I'm in the car driving? That's my fear. And then all of it just hit me. And I said, I'm going to film this. Like, I'm going to make this ridiculous because, in a way, it's completely ridiculous. And we can't logically try to get into Hamas's brain when they're going to send the rockets over. But we as humans, we look for ways to understand, to try to get some sort of control over a situation.
Mhm.
So I think that's something that living in Israel has really given me, is the challenges of being an American living here, the cultural challenges, the language challenges. I've used it really humor as a survival technique
Mhm.
because what's the alternative? I mean, we can all kick and scream and pull our hair or wigs out or what have you. But to get through the challenges of life, if we can look for the absurd, if we can look for what challenges us, but in a way that also can make us laugh. You know how something, let's say, happens like with your child, and at the time it's not funny, but then like 10 years later you look back, oh, do you remember the time? Ha ha ha. Then it's funny. That's what I try to look in the present.
Yeah. And not only that, I find that what I love about the content that you put out and about what you do as a person is your selfless giving during the war. You've shared with us things that you've done for the soldiers. I remember you showing us how you threw in a load of laundry or many loads of laundry. You've cooked food. And then you also started a Mamala campaign, which has been so popular and has given so much to so many families. Tell us more about that.
So I was in touch with a social media friend. She's also a content creator, and her husband is the rabbi of a big unit on the northern border. And she's at home with like 6 kids of varying ages and was just saying how difficult it was.
Mhm.
And I had an idea to use my platform to, let's see if we can somehow get my followers involved, because I was, as much hate as I would get, because any content creator who's even Jewish, let alone Israeli, is going to get that kind of hate. I was getting so much support. And how can we help you? We feel so helpless, that sort of thing. So I sort of married the idea, and I came up with the concept of Mamale. And what it is to provide a family, like a reservist, an active duty soldier called Miluim, to provide his family with a meal. And it's not an ongoing thing. So let's say a family, they get it once. Okay. But I ended up turning to mainly to my Instagram followers and also my Facebook followers, and said, let's also support Israeli businesses, small businesses, because everyone's struggling.
Yeah.
And what I did is, with the money raised, and I have to say, it blew me away. I raised $20,000 in the course of a month, mostly through my Instagram followers, who I call my bubblers, and they really earned that title. I was absolutely floored. And we were able to employ up to 9 small home-based caterers, and we sent meals to families all over Israel.
The Desire to Be podcast is taking sponsors for upcoming episodes. If you have a business that you'd like to advertise, if you have a product that you'd like to advertise, this is the platform to do it on. It will reach all my audience members, giving you lots of great exposure. Or maybe you just want to sponsor an upcoming show and support the Desire to Be podcast. If you're interested in sponsorship or advertising, reach out to me on either LinkedIn or on Instagram. You'll find me under my name, Devorah Goldberg. Thank you again for listening.
I just want to repeat this slowly because I really want people to understand the power of what you've done. You didn't only get donations from abroad, but the donations from abroad helped support small businesses in Israel to provide food for other needy people in Israel. Just to look at the coming together of this web, it's mind-blowing, but it's creativity, and it's using something of social media where people are like, it's a crazy place. It's like you said, there's so much hatred that goes on, but you were you're a beacon of light, and you attract people into such a powerful campaign. So I just wanted to hone in on that, let people know what you do. And in a second, we're going to let them know how they can be part of this.
Thank God. I really do feel like I'd never done something like this before. I never raised money, but in a way, my social media presence made it relatively easy. And like I said, I was absolutely blown away by people's generosity. And, not only Jews were giving non-Jews, just anybody who wanted to feel like they could give a gift of love. And it was an immediate gift, because I would raise the money one week. We would get the meals organized. It was like you saw the fruits of your labors right away. And now it was something that I couldn't continue doing on my own. It was just too much. So I partnered with a nonprofit here in Israel, and they were formed exactly to do this, to support these IDF reservist families, and through a network of 10,000 volunteers in various ways, through babysitting or dog walking, that sort of thing. And they said, listen, we actually want to send Shabbat meals. So for the last month, I've been working with them, and I'm still raising the money. But then they organize it and send the meals out to families. I wish we could give in larger amounts. As this war has gone on, it's been 4 months. It's getting a little bit harder to raise funds. But what I did is I was just in the States, and my daughter is in Charlotte, North Carolina for the year. And I spoke. I had an evening of comedy for the women in Charlotte. And I also collected for Mamale. And we were able to gift about 20 families with Shabbat meals based on those donations that I raised. So I'd love to keep doing that. You had mentioned this summer I'm planning to come back to the States to visit my family. And I'd love to speak in different communities, not only to give over this message of hope and light in the darkness, but also to, raise some money for these types of important projects.
And if people want to join the Mamala campaign, how are they able to do it virtually?
Yeah, we do have an online page through JGive, and I'm happy to give you the link. Anybody going to my social media, especially Instagram page, can also see it in my bio. And you can donate in US dollars, Canadian dollars, Israeli shekels, or British pounds.
Love that. I'm curious, Julie, who inspires you on a daily basis?
I think my number one, there are two people in my life, two women. One is my mother. She is an incredibly creative person who my parents, thank God, they've been very successful business people and they've given very generously. And I take that as an example because my mother in particular, she just naturally gives to people. If a friend is ill, she'll make chicken soup. That's just within her and her bones is to give. And I saw that and she modeled that so well. So she has this very creative component. She is an artist. So I don't have like the gift of like doing sculpture or painting, but I think I got some of that talent in a different way. That's an inspiration. My late grandmother, my father's mother, who was a Holocaust survivor from Germany. She wasn't a religious woman, but she was a very proud Jew and she supported Israel and Jewish causes. And when my family and I became religious, she was very supportive. And I think she felt so happy that being Jewish was important enough to me to make it a priority in my life. So I would say those two women, the two generations above me, have been very inspirational. And I think also just the Israeli people at large inspire me. Ahavat Yisrael, Derech Eretz, these sorts of concepts were always very important to me. But it wasn't until October 7th. And before October 7th, the country was incredibly divided. It was very painful on a political level, which got very personal for Israelis. And all of a sudden, we went from one extreme to the other. Mm-hmm. And when you point out about what I did to help people, this was pretty typical. I mean, almost everybody I knew and know is helping in some way. So I'm just grateful. I'm grateful to be a part of Am Yisrael. I'm very grateful to live here in Israel, despite the challenges, which I enjoy making fun of, but I'm very grateful and inspired by Israelis.
On the Desire to Be podcast, I hone into the greatness of an individual desire. Because each one of us is really driven by a desire to be something special, to do something special, something unique in this world. What would you say your desire in life is?
I think my number one thing is to make people smile and to make people chuckle. Because I'm on social media, I don't really see that. I can't, it's different if you're in front of an audience and then you play off of them, they play off of you, you hear the laughter. I don't hear that. I don't see that on social media. I only can get the feedback. But my father-in-law recently passed away and he was a musician. He played saxophone and he had also a sense of humor. And when people come to a Shiva and you hear all the stories and you see how much one person can touch people, and it made me think how when at 120, it's our time to leave this world, what do you want your legacy to be? What do you want people to remember you by? And I hope that when I'm at 120, people will think of me and say, despite it all, she was still able to laugh and she made us laugh. And that's my gift, I hope, to others.
Love that.
Can I add one thing?
Sure. Go ahead.
So in the beginning, and I don't know if you'll include it, but when I talked about having suffered from depression for so many years, and that it seems to be something that affects a lot of comedians, I think they always say that when you've tasted darkness, then you can enjoy the light more. And I really feel like that was the case for me, that I was in such a dark place inside myself. And then through hard work and support, I was able to get out of it so that I could be my full self and reach my full potential. And I think because of it, I really would encourage anybody who's going through any challenge that is affecting their mental health and they're not feeling like themselves completely, to know that you can take medication. I'm all for it. But if you really work and find who you are and you're true to yourself, then you'll be able to shine your light more and know that how you feel today isn't how you're going to feel in a year or in 2 years. So I don't want to just be cliche and say, hang on for a better day, because when you're in a dark place, that doesn't resonate. But I can speak from experience and say that the days that I was lying in bed and just couldn't really face stepping outside my bedroom to how I am right now, I hope it's just a message of hope for people, that just because you're in a darker place now doesn't mean it's always going to be like that. So I really wish anybody listening who is going through a challenge, I really wish that they will be able to access the tools in their lives to see the light.
That's beautiful. It's encouraging and it's empowering, not only for yourself, be able to use your experience and help other people out as well. Thank you, Julie, so much for joining today's conversation. I think we uncovered so much about the condition in Israel, about how you deal with it, what you bring to this world, the love and the light and the laughter. I'm going to drop in the show notes exactly how people can get in touch with you if they'd like to book you for comedy for their communities. And I'm looking forward to laughing more together with you.
Ah, what a great episode. Thank you for being here. I truly appreciate you. I'd love for you to tap 5 stars and let me know what resonated. Be sure to connect with me on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn under my name, Devorah Goldberg. That's where I give you more content. That's where we're able to engage even further. Until next episode, stay safe and be well.